The Korean War, a forgotten war? Often overshadowed by the colossal events of World War II and the Vietnam War, the Korean War is sometimes relegated to the background of history, yet its impact is profound and enduring. A war without a winner? Some say so. But the reality is far more nuanced. The armistice signed in 1953 was not a peace treaty, but merely a ceasefire. The war technically never ended, but the truth is far more complex, far more tragic. The Korean peninsula remains divided, a stark reminder of the conflict that once raged. The demilitarized zone, DMZ, stands as a symbol of this unresolved tension. The Korean War never truly ended. For the veterans who fought, the memories are as vivid as ever. They visit memorials, remembering comrades lost and battles fought. It sleeps, a slumbering giant, on the Korean peninsula. Imagine a land divided. The 38th parallel separates families, friends, and a nation. The barbed wire and guard posts are constant reminders of a war that still lingers. A people torn apart by ideology and by war. Families were separated, some never to reunite. The pain of separation is a wound that has yet to heal. This is Korea even today, decades after the guns fell silent. The scars of war are visible in the lives of the people, in the stories of refugees who fled their homes, and in the divided families who still hope for reunification. The Korean War, a conflict often overshadowed by World War II and the Vietnam War, left an indelible mark on the world. It was a war that reshaped nations and altered the course of history. It was a war that drew superpowers into its vortex, with the United States and its allies on one side, and China and the Soviet Union on the other. The involvement of these superpowers turned the Korean peninsula into a battleground for ideological supremacy. A war that reshaped the geopolitical landscape. The Korean War set the stage for the Cold War dynamics that would dominate global politics for decades. It was a conflict that highlighted the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of war. Today, the Korean peninsula remains one of the most heavily militarized regions in the world. The presence of military forces on both sides of the DMZ is a constant reminder of the unresolved conflict. Diplomatic efforts have been made over the years to bring about a lasting peace, but the road to reconciliation is fraught with challenges. The hope for a unified Korea remains, but the path is uncertain. The Korean War memorials and monuments stand as a testament to the sacrifices made and the enduring hope for peace. They remind us that the war may have ended in a ceasefire, but the quest for peace continues. As new generations learn about the Korean War, the lessons of history are passed down. The hope is that they will carry forward the dream of a peaceful and unified Korea. The Korean War never truly ended. It lives on in the memories of those who experienced it, in the divided land and in the hearts of the people who long for peace. The story of Korea is one of resilience, hope, and the enduring quest for unity. To understand the Korean War, we must journey back in time. Back to the aftermath of World War II, Korea, once under Japanese rule, was divided along the 38th parallel. In the north, Kim Il-sung, a communist leader backed by the Soviet Union, rose to power. In the south, Syngman Rhee, an anti-communist, led a government supported by the United States. Two ideologies, two visions for Korea, two leaders vying for control. The stage was set for conflict, the seeds of war were sown. Dawn broke on June 25, 1950. The silence was shattered. North Korean troops, armed with Soviet tanks and weapons, surged across the 38th parallel. The South Korean army, ill-prepared for the onslaught, was quickly overwhelmed. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, fell within days. The world watched in disbelief. A small, seemingly insignificant conflict had erupted into a major crisis. The Cold War, a war of ideologies between the United States and the Soviet Union, had ignited on the Korean peninsula. The United States, determined to contain the spread of communism, rallied the United Nations. A multinational force led by General Douglas MacArthur was dispatched to Korea. The arrival of UN forces turned the tide of the war. North Korean troops were pushed back, their advance halted. MacArthur, emboldened by victory, pushed north, crossing the 38th parallel. The war, once a localized conflict, had escalated into a proxy war between the superpowers. The stakes had been raised. The world held its breath. Section 5. China enters the fray, turning the tide. MacArthur's advance north had unforeseen consequences. China, fearing an invasion of its own territory, entered the war on the side of North Korea. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops poured across the border. The UN forces, caught off guard by the sheer number of Chinese soldiers, were forced to retreat. The Korean War had become a bloody stalemate. The two sides, locked in a bitter struggle, fought to a standstill. The war dragged on month after agonizing month. Section 6. Stalemate and attrition, a war without end. The war settled into a brutal rhythm: attack and counterattack, advance and retreat. The battle lines shifted back and forth, but neither side could deliver a decisive blow. The Korean peninsula became a landscape of devastation. Cities and villages were reduced to rubble. Millions of people were displaced from their homes. The war had become a war of attrition, a grinding, relentless conflict that seemed to have no end in sight. Section 7. The human cost. Scars on a divided land. The Korean War exacted a terrible toll on both sides. Millions of soldiers and civilians were killed. Families were torn apart. The Korean War left an indelible mark on the Korean psyche. The war's legacy is one of division, distrust, and enduring pain. Section 8. Political maneuvering, a game of chess. While the battles raged on the Korean peninsula, a different kind of war was being fought in the corridors of power. Behind closed doors, leaders from both sides engaged in intense political maneuvering, each move calculated to gain an upper hand in the global arena. The Korean War became a pawn in the Cold War chess game between the United States and the Soviet Union. Every decision, every strategy was a move on a grand chessboard, where the stakes were nothing less than global dominance. Each superpower sought to use the conflict to advance its own interests, providing military and economic aid to their respective allies. The United States poured resources into South Korea, while the Soviet Union and later China supported North Korea, creating a proxy battleground for their ideological struggle. The Korean War demonstrated the dangerous potential for escalation in the nuclear age. The spectre of nuclear conflict loomed large, with both sides aware that a misstep could lead to catastrophic consequences. This was a time when the world held its breath, fearing the unimaginable. The world watched nervously as the two superpowers came perilously close to direct confrontation. The tension was palpable, and the stakes were incredibly high. Every diplomatic move, every military action was scrutinized as the balance of power teetered on a knife's edge. The Korean War was not just a regional conflict, it was a critical chapter in the broader Cold War narrative, a testament to the lengths to which both sides would go to assert their dominance on the world stage. Section 9. The Armistice, an uneasy peace. After 3 long years of fighting, an armistice agreement was finally signed on July 27, 1953. The guns fell silent, the fighting stopped, but the war did not end. The armistice agreement established a demilitarized zone, or DMZ, along the 38th parallel, separating North and South Korea. But the two Koreas remained divided, a constant reminder of the war that had torn them apart. The Korean War, though officially over, continued to cast a long shadow over the Korean peninsula and the world. Section 10. Who won the Korean War? A question for the ages. The Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, was a conflict that lasted from 1950 to 1953. Despite its relatively short duration, the war had profound and lasting impacts on the Korean peninsula and the world. So, who won the Korean War? This question has puzzled historians, political analysts, and the general public for decades. The answer is not straightforward. There are no easy answers. The war ended in an armistice, not a peace treaty, which means that technically the war never officially ended. The Korean peninsula remains divided to this day, with North Korea and South Korea existing as two separate entities. North Korea, though devastated by the war, survived. The regime, led by Kim Il-sung, managed to maintain its grip on power. Despite the immense human and material losses, North Korea continued to pursue its ideological goals, becoming one of the most isolated and militarized nations in the world. South Korea, with the help of the United States and the United Nations, emerged from the conflict as a vibrant democracy and economic powerhouse. The post-war period saw South Korea undergo rapid industrialization and economic growth, transforming it into one of the world's leading economies. The Korean War was a tragedy for all involved. It resulted in the deaths of millions of soldiers and civilians, leaving countless families torn apart and communities destroyed. It was a war that claimed millions of lives, a war that saw some of the most brutal fighting and harshest conditions imaginable. The human cost was staggering, with both sides suffering immense losses. A war that left a lasting legacy of division and distrust. The Korean Peninsula remains one of the most heavily fortified and tense regions in the world. The Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, stands as a stark reminder of the unresolved conflict and the ongoing tensions between the North and the South. The Korean War is a reminder of the human cost of conflict, the lives lost, the families shattered, and the communities forever changed. It serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact of war on ordinary people. The enduring power of ideology played a significant role in the conflict. The war was not just a battle for territory, but also a clash of ideologies, communism versus democracy. This ideological struggle continues to shape the political landscape of the Korean Peninsula and the fragility of peace. The armistice agreement brought an end to the active fighting, but it did not bring lasting peace. The Korean Peninsula remains in a state of suspended conflict, with occasional flare-ups and ongoing military tensions. It is a war that continues to resonate today, influencing international relations and military strategies. The experiences and lessons learned from the Korean War have shaped the policies and approaches of nations around the world, a war whose lessons we must never forget. The Korean War teaches us about the complexities of international conflict, the importance of diplomacy, and the need for vigilance in maintaining peace. It is a chapter in history that continues to offer valuable insights and lessons for future generations.